Good evening. The hour being 7 p.m. on Monday, July 24th, 2023. I'd like to call to order the City of Laconia City Council meeting. Before we go any further, though, I'd ask Councilor Lippman if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We're joined this evening by our recording secretary and city clerk, Katie Gargano, and ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney,
Yes, here.
Counselor Susie,
Here.
Counselor Lippman,
Here.
Counselor Haynes,
Here.
Counselor Bogert,
Here.
Counselor Felch,
Here.
Mayor Hosmer.
Present. We're also joined at the table this evening by City Manager Kirk Piatti and our Finance Director Glenn Smith. It is my intention to move item number 21H on the agenda under new business forward, and we'll do it in very early on here. So, agenda item number 7, which is acceptance of minutes. City Council regular meeting minutes of June 26th, 2023. Minutes of Laconia City Council meeting of June 26th were distributed to the members of the City Council on, there's something wrong here, on July 6th, excuse me. With no corrections or changes submitted to the clerk, the minutes will be accepted as distributed. Moving on to agenda item number 9, which is citizens' comments for matters not on the agenda. If anyone is here and would like to speak to a matter not on this evening's agenda, now would be the appropriate time to step forward and introduce yourself. Come on up, Dr. Patterson. How are you? Okay. I'm going to call on,
It's on the agenda. What
yeah,
is
that's what I
it?
thought. I'm going to call Marv Everson up right now. We're going to go right to 21H, which is a grant agreement between Laconia Municipal Airport and the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, Bureau of Aeronautics.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilman.
Come on.
We are seeking authorization for the mayor to sign a grant offer, which we've received from NHDOT, Bureau of Aeronautics. It is the ARP grant, the Airport Rescue Plan Grant. We applied for it and received the allotment that is approved for general aviation airports of our size, which is $59,000. I am merely seeking authorization for the mayor to sign the agreement so that we can accept the grant offer.
And the grant offered use was, you might as well let us know what
Sure.
it was used for, right?
Sure. We are, at the airport, we now have an emergency backup generator, which we did not have. The cost of it, it was in the neighborhood of $90,000 or $91,000. $59,000 entirely will go to pay that. And then we applied for and received from the same ARP grant, $31,900 from Belknap County. So that pays for the emergency generator, which we now have. It's installed and ready for a power failure.
Looking forward to our first. Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marv. One more step in the work that's been done at the airport to make it really a full-service facility in so many respects, allowing us to continue to operate, and certainly in inclement weather. We now have a de-icing process there as well. We have a brand-new heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, which was aged, right?
Oh, yes, I believe it was the original back in 85, 86 when the was built.
We've completely upgraded that, and then in the event of power failure, we still have the ability to run everything at the airport, including ILS system, runway lights, and things of that
We
nature.
cannot do the ILS system, that is owned by the FAA,
Okay,
but we can run all of our runway, taxiway lights and signs, and of course, the terminal entirely.
terrific. Thank you, Marv. Any questions for Marv in regards to that? No? Okay, thanks. So right now, I'd be looking for a motion to move to authorize Andrew Hosmer, Mayor of the City of Laconia, or Cork Beatty, Laconia City Manager, to sign grant SBG-09-19-2023 Airport Rescue Plan Grant to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic. So made by Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 11. 11A. Which is the appointment of Louis Joseph as a regular member of the planning board. Mr. Joseph was Mr. Joseph is currently an alternate, not was, but is currently an alternate. His position on the board, he would move to a full-time position on the board with the resignation of Peter Brunette, who was chair of the planning board. He submitted his resignation on July 12th as he was moving out of the city. Following his resignation, the board voted in a new chair and voted to elect Mr. Joseph as vice chair. As Mr. Joseph is, as I indicated, currently an alternate, his position on the board will need to be approved by a regular member position, which requires a council vote on the approval. The consensus of the appointments committee is strongly recommend the council appoint Mr. Joseph to a regular term on the planning board expiring at the end of June 2026 and waive the requirements to interview him. So right now, we'll be looking for a motion to move to appoint Louis Joseph as a regular member of the planning board to a 3-year term expiring at the end of June 2026. So made by Counselor Susie, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion?
If I might, just very
Please do.
quickly, Mr. Mayor, I've worked with Mr. Joseph as the council's representative on the planning board. He has been an above-average member of the board, and I wholeheartedly support his appointment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further discussion. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 13. Under 13A, it's a public hearing. Discontinuance of Paper Street, Jefferson Street. Notice of the public hearing was made available in the July 6, 2023 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun and posted at Laconia City Hall, Laconia Community Center, Laconia Public Library, and the offices of the SAU. Action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business this evening. I'd like to open the public hearing in this matter at 7:08 p.m. And anyone wishing to speak to this matter, now would be the appropriate time. Hi.
Good evening, Council. My name is Sarah Ruberry. I'm here from Westcott Law on behalf of Appleton Holdings LLC. Appleton Holdings is managed by Paugus Properties, who was the applicant requesting this discontinuance. As you may know, the portion that we're looking at is Jefferson Street from the eastern side of Dell Avenue all the way down to the railroad. This is approximately 600 feet long strip, and it was accepted as a roadway in 1848. Despite that, in the last 175 years or so, there's no record of ever having actually been made into a road. So by asking the city to approve its discontinuance, we're certainly not asking for any loss of public rights, as it's never been a thoroughfare, and instead would revert back to essentially what it has been ever since the 1800s, which is simply just private land of the abutters.
Thank you,
all.
Attorney. Appreciate the insight. Anyone else like to speak to this matter? Seeing none, I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:10 PM, and as I said, we may take this matter up under unfinished business. Item number 13B, which is a public hearing on ordinance 2022-189 to amend the city code, chapter 189 sewers. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the July 6, 2023 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun, posted at Laconia City Hall, Laconia Community Center, Laconia Public Library, and the offices of the SAU. Action on this item may be taken up under unfinished business later on this evening. I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:10 PM. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter, now would be the appropriate time. Good evening, Marcia.
Good evening, Councilman. I'm Marcia Hayward, 9 Wildwood Road. I am the president of Wildwood Village Condominium, and I am also the spokesperson this evening for Wildwood Village 2. I wish to, first of all, express my appreciation to Nate Garrett for his presentation at the July 15th meeting regarding the private sewer collection system. And although the presentation clarified some points for me, it also raised questions for me as well. I would like you to know that the Wildwood Village Condominium is in agreement with the spirit of the ordinance, but it cannot support the ordinance or the amendment to the ordinance as it is currently proposed. And our objections center around two major topics: funding and the public-private connectivity between systems. Let me address the first one, funding. According to Nate, the cleaning and inspection program will be funded by the Sanitary Sewer Fund. It was never revealed as to the source of those funds. Where does that money come from? Will it be an ongoing source for the cleaning and inspection program? If any or all of the monies arise from the city's sewer rates, I would like to remind the council that private homeowners, such as in my association, we pay the same sewer rates as public homeowners. And thus the private homeowners are paying for the maintenance and repair of public systems without any benefit of the same. As Nate reminded his audience on the 15th, we chose to live in a private community and be without services. And that is true. We did choose to live in a private community. But I would argue that the issue of sewer maintenance and repair is far more complex than the plowing of roads and the collecting of trash, and it is far more costly. With regards to the public-private connectivity, there are public systems that connect into private systems. And currently, the city has no plans on how to handle issues that arise with these co-joined systems. Case in point, the sewerage for 7 public homes on Linwood Road passes through my neighboring association, Wildwood Village 2. There was a break in the sewer line on the property of Wildwood Village 2. When the association contacted the city regarding the problem, the city took no responsibility nor interest in resolving the matter. What the city's attorney did was send a rather demeaning letter to the association, and that action garnered hostility and distrust rather than the cooperation that was being sought. Before there can be any ordinance change, the city has to address the problem of how it's going to handle co-joined systems. Now, I've only highlighted 2 major concerns this evening, but there are other questions which we will deal with our city council rep, who happens to be Representative Littman here, rather than take up any more of your time this evening. But it is the position of both associations that the ordinance or the amendment to the ordinance needs further clarification, and we ask the council to table the issue. Thank you.
Would you like to speak to that at some point when they're finished?
Yes.
Hello.
evening, Mayor. Good evening, council people. My name is James Wason. I'm from Southdown Shores, and for those of you who know Southdown Shores, it's approximately 500 living units, 20 condominium associations, varying in size from just under 50 to 2 units, plus 100 single-family homes. We again had a very, I believe, productive meeting last week with Nate, but again, we have concerns because what we're told, the spoken word and the written word, do not agree. There's conflict. We think this amendment has not been thought out, doesn't have clarification, and needs further work. In the spirit, we think it's the right thing to do, but to give you some examples, we're told by Nate that when they do the cleaning, they will use GPS and map it. But if you look at the ordinance, it doesn't say that. If you the city is reporting, you are requiring us to report our problems, which we understand that. But the city is telling us not to report to you, but we've got to report to the EPA, the DES, the state, and CCU. That doesn't make any sense, because how can the city report about its system if it doesn't have all the private systems included in it? Doesn't make any sense from a system point of view. And thirdly, the city are telling us we're going to need agreements, because at Southdown we have, as I said, 20 condominium units. So we're going to have to agreements with them. The pipes on Long Bay go under our ground, so we're going to have an agreement with them. We have the golf course that comes into our system, we're going to have an agreement with them. So there's a huge amount of legal work here. We have asked that the city provide us with a template or examples of what's needed, because if we talk to attorneys, we get different opinions of what's needed, and there's a lot of legal work there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Jay Niederman. I'm the president of Long Bay, sister community to Southdown. We are smaller. We have approximately 179 units, 5 villages, and a number of single-family homes. And I would like to echo and stand shoulder to shoulder with my friends from Southdown. We are in the exact same position. Nate has done a great job of trying to garner the issues, and I salute him for that, but I just don't think we're there yet. Now, I raised the issue of mapping. I raised it first at the meeting a few weeks ago, and I confronted him a little bit, and I said, will you support the fact that the city is going to take care of the mapping? And I put him on the spot a little bit, and I think he supports that idea, but as it's presently written, that's not what the ordinance says. And I'm an attorney, and I don't like it when someone has to say, it's not in writing, but trust me, it's gonna be okay. And that's, I'm afraid, a lot of what we're dealing with here. A resident of ours just this evening, late afternoon, made a point. Traditionally, if we've had a problem, and thankfully there haven't been many in Southdown or Long Bay, the city has helped us resolve it. We don't know what's gonna happen with that. If there is, God forbid, a problem, are we gonna be left to our own devices? Do we need to start calling from scratch, trying to find someone to fix it? Or is the city gonna come in and maybe we'll have to bear some financial responsibility, but we don't wanna be left high and dry if we've got residents who don't have service. There's just so many of these little nooks and crannies that need to be filtered out. In concept, I think we're heading in the right direction. I just don't think, respectfully, that we're there right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak to this matter? Welcome.
Sean Farrell, I live in 37 Captain's Walk in South Downs. It's 12 houses, 1 village. Our sewage pipes go directly into the Winnipesaukee River Basin translocator. So, as I understand it, I don't know if anyone's from the water department's here, but a fraction of most of our billing for sewage is going to the state, and there's a fraction going to the support of these Laconius sewage lines. But we're being charged for using sewage lines, which we're not using. None of the, we're going right to the state thing. Now, if you look at Sanborn, I think that's the name of the town, they don't have a public storage system. The homes that connect to it are going directly to that thing. Their fees for the sewage is about a fraction of what we're paying in Laconia. And why? Because they don't have a public storage system to connect to. So we are not using one in South Downs. We're going directly to the thing. So you can say, yeah, you gotta repair your pipes. They're your pipes, you own them. But why are we being charged a fee if we don't connect to any Laconia sewage pipes? I guess the other question I had, I made it the last time there was a meeting on this, is it what's the definition in this bill for a private sewage system? Is it just HOA? I don't know the answer to this. Does community college is that a private, an apartment complex that has a storage line going out to these public sewer lines? Do they have to pay, are they involved? Do they get inspected? And also, the rest of the towns in this area, I haven't heard any articles about them having their pipes inspected. Is Laconia the only town in this area that is worried about this? And so I just haven't seen any answers to these questions. I see a lot of reports, and I think there's a lot to be worked out. We've heard the legal issues being discussed, but I think there's a question of fairness. Why do the homeowners in these HOAs have to be the focus primarily, it seems, and not apartment complexes, community colleges? I mean, we have New Hampshire Pavilion. I think they have bathrooms. Where's that going? Are their pipes being inspected? You know, that's outside of the preview of this council, but in terms of fairness between the towns, the other towns, I think there needs to be a better explanation of where these fees are going and why HOAs in particular are being focused on. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to address this matter during the public hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at 7:22 PM. Counselor Lippman?
Appreciate the public that's come out and talked about this evening, obviously. I think I would make a motion to table and also ask that we have additional hearings on this matter to make sure that we've teased out all the issues. I know we heard some things that tonight that were new to me, and so I'd like to get a little more public input, so I'd like to table it for this evening, but also maybe you need to separate the motions, but take it off the table at some point and have another hearing, maybe deal with the issues that have been raised tonight that are sort of new to us or questions for us, and then after we've done that, do another hearing, but give this plenty of room to breathe to make sure we've identified all the issues. So my motion is to table.
So
Mayor, I'd second that.
I think it's,
if you'll
is it
allow
on
us
the
to
table
do-
right now? I'm sorry to interrupt, but does this need to come off the table, or is it already on the table?
I think it's on the table.
I think it's on the table already. So hold on one second for just some clarity on this.
So do we want to bring this item forward so we can?
No, we're just gonna, I think we should just let people know that it's the council's intent to have it remain on the table.
We were not necessarily looking for any type of motion item, more than just guidance for how we want to move forward. So
Got it.
it's exactly what you're doing by what you're doing right now, is giving that guidance to, there's a lot more questions to be answered, in a potential future public hearings. So that was, there was no motion, more of a guidance.
So in the interest of, the public hearing is closed. In the interest of people who've attended here and their time, if there's no objection, I'd like to pull forward item 22B, which is proposed changes to Code of Ordinances, Chapter 189 Sewers. And if there's no objection, it seems to me that Counselor Lippman has made a motion to table. Counselor Cheney has seconded it. Motion to table is non-debatable. Is there a roll call on that or not? Can we just go, all those in favor of the tabling motion? Raise your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. So this item is on the table and will not be discussed any further tonight. Moving along to item number 13C. It's a public hearing on a proposed application for CDBG funds for improvements at Millview Apartments.
The bad part of that is she knows I'm older than
Oh, my paperwork squared away here. 22C. No, 13C. Community Development Block Grant funds are available to municipalities through New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority. Up to $500,000 is annually available for economic development projects, up to $500,000 for housing projects, up to $500,000 for public facility projects, up to $350,000 in emergency funds, and up to $25,000 per planning study grant. All projects must directly benefit a majority of low and moderate income persons. This project, in regards to Millview Apartments, conforms to Laconia's housing and community development plan's goal of promote activities that protect the health and safety of residents and visitors, both a short-term and long-term goal. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the July 12, 2023 edition of Laconia Daily Sun, posted on July 11, 2023 at Laconia City Hall, Laconia Parks and Recreation Community Center, and Laconia Public Library. I'd like to open the public hearing at 7:27 PM. Anyone who would like to speak to this matter, now would be the appropriate time. Welcome.
Good evening, Donna Lane, CDBG consultant, and as you know, you read part of it, but I have to read a little bit more, okay? This is a proposed application in the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $500,000 in CDBG housing grant funds. Of the grant funds, up to $30,000 will be retained by the city for administrative labor compliance costs associated with the project. Up to $475,000 of the funds will be subgranted to Lakes Region community developers for improvements to Millview Apartments, an 18-unit affordable housing complex located at 115 to 117 Union Ave, 20 and 28 Locust Street, and 5 Jameson Street. The improvements will include new siding, new boilers, roofing, and possibly some landscaping improvements. The project conforms with the Housing and Community Development Plan's goal of encourage a varied stock of safe, sanitary, decent, and affordable housing for persons of all age and income groups.
The only question I have on that, thank you, Donna, is the number I have here is up to $470,000 of the funds will be subgranted to Lakes Region community developers. I think you
Is that
said
what I said?
475, is
No.
that,
What she
who's
said.
correct?
470, sorry.
470, okay. Terrific, thank you very much.
moving right along.
Is there any further comment on this matter right now? Okay. Seeing none, this matter may be taken up under unfinished business this evening as well. So I'd like to close the public hearing at 7:29 PM. Agenda item number 13D, public hearing, residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for the Millview Apartments Rehabilitation Project and CDBG application. This plan outlines measures under the Uniform Relocation Act required for CDBG projects that involve any displacement or relocation of persons or businesses. If the city were to undertake a CDBG project which involved displacement or relocation, they would follow this plan. The plan outlines the measures they would take to find comparable, suitable housing for persons or businesses displaced or relocated. No displacement or relocation is anticipated for this project. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the July 12th, 2023 edition of Laconia Daily Sun and posted on July 11th, 2023 at Laconia City Hall, the Laconia Parks and Recreation Community Center, and Laconia Public Library. I'd like to open the public hearing on this matter at 7:29 PM, and if anyone would like to speak to it, now would be the appropriate time. Seeing none, I'd like to close the public hearing on this matter at 7:30 PM. Again, this matter will be taken up under unfinished business later on this evening. Item number 14A. Hello, you're hiding. I was wondering where you were. Presentation from Stephen Hamilton, Whitney Consulting Group in regards to valuations.
Does it display? You can do that. We'll see if that works.
They can have mine if they.
Sticky tack.
Whoops. Need one more?
We have enough?
We need one more for Council.
One more, and then one to Katie.
Thank you. This will just take me 2 seconds. I'm sorry for the delay. Your Honor, members of the council, thank you very much for having me here tonight. This is an annual occurrence, reporting the progress that we are making towards the annual revaluation of property. This is going to be another year where there will be increases in value, although they probably are going to be a lot less dramatic than they were in the last 2 years. But the trend of increasing market value has been continuing, and I think this analysis and report will show some of that activity to you. So every year, every New Hampshire city and town has to maintain their assessing records, but every 5 years they have to attain a market value estimate. Here, the council has decided that it's going to make these valuations every year. This year is a particularly sensitive year because this is the 5th year, and it's the city's assessment review year, the year in which the Department of Revenue Administration will come in and judge the way that the assessing records are being maintained, but also the way that we are attaining market value estimates on property. So there'll be a close examination of the performance of this valuation in this year. Last year, we did an update of values for 2022. At that point, the assessments were at full and true value, and that means attaining a ratio, an assessment to sales ratio of between 90 and 110% of market value. The DRA conducts a equalization ratio study on an annual basis, and when they did, in October of last year, they determined that the sale ratio had dropped to 85.9 from April 1st of last year to the end of October. And so there was already an indication from the DRA's analysis of last year's valuation that we were going to have to do some more work in order to stay at market value. Simply put, 85.9% would imply that the assessments were about 16% below market value. When we look at the sales that are occurring now, and for the period that we'll be setting values in 2023, it's very clear that while the sale volume has declined some, the values are still markedly strong and increasing.
The citywide assessments have to be adjusted to account for the changes in market value, but not every class of property will change in the same way. But a big picture glimpse of what's been happening here in Laconia and a good understanding of what's been happening statewide is looking at the next page where there's a slide from the New Hampshire Realtors Association that shows that year-to-date for April sales in Laconia, the median selling price of properties had increased from last year, where it was $354,500 to $370,000 for single-family homes. And you can see the trending of the gold-colored line on that page, which takes into account all of the state information on median selling prices on a 12-month rolling average, and the blue line, which is Laconia. The blue line indicates that at the beginning of the year there was a slight dip, but that seems to have rebounded. We're hoping that this is going to be a moment where the market begins to plateau and doesn't continue to seriously increase over the coming years. But the future is the future, and we'll have to meet it when we get there. Mrs. Hamilton is fond of telling me that I'm always in a hurry to meet the future, but that's mostly her problem and not your problem. Okay, what does it mean? So we've looked at 416 qualified sales that have occurred from April 1st of 2022 through March 31st of 2023. That's the primary sale analysis period for making these valuation adjustments. You can see in the table that's shown how those different classes of property break down and how the median ratio, or the indication of the percentage of market value for those properties, they differ by use. They'll also differ by location. Of course, I don't have enough time to make the full presentation on what will happen with different locations, but you can get a good sense from this breakdown that there are some classes that have outperformed the total median ratio, which is at just below 80. So while there is an increase in value which is predicted for this revaluation, it isn't going to be as steep as it had been in the previous years for the whole sample, but there are some examples where there may be some larger increases and some examples where there may be some decreases. For things like manufactured housing units have been selling at dramatically higher prices, and the rate of appreciation for manufactured housing units has been far outstripping the pace of appreciation for single-family dwellings. Mostly, I think, because of the affordability of those units. Being at the more modest end of the housing spectrum, they are more impacted by the general shortage of housing units within the state. Some things, like apartments, are performing very well because of the huge increases in average rents and the ability of landlords to make income off of rental properties. But residential unimproved land is lagging behind all of those value changes. Mostly we anticipate because of the shortage of contractors. It used to be that building a house was a ready substitution for buying an already improved property. But because of the shortage of workmen and contractors to be able to construct a property, an exercise that used to take maybe 4 months or 5, sometimes 6 months to complete, now will take years. 1, 2, even more years. And so that puts vacant land at a disadvantage compared to the improved properties because they're ready to go. And Mrs. Hamilton isn't gonna wait around for too long for me to be able to give her a place to live. And so that's a big challenge, I think, within the residential development community, because I think there are a lot of people who would like to develop a lot more housing units, but for these lack of resources, it makes it very difficult. Oh, in that, there is a class of property in there that's at less than 50%. It's a category of boat storage and regular storage units that are condominiumized. They're unusual types of property that don't traditionally get defined as real estate, but for this tax purpose, they have to be. And so it's a large group of odd things, and so we're not putting a lot of reliance on the statistic that's coming out of this. Based on the preliminary analysis, we're expecting that there are going to be increases in assessments to probably most of the categories, although some of them are gonna be a little bit higher than others. Some increases will be lesser than others. But that's typical of this market, because there is such a wide variety of properties within the city. An increase in your assessment doesn't necessarily mean an increase in your tax bill, although it could. We really have to wait until we see what the tax rate will be for 2023, and that won't get set until the end of October. The impact on an individual's tax bill isn't going to be known until then. But I would encourage people not to just take last year's rate, because a tax rate is an expression of the amount of money that gets spent in the community and then spreading it out across the whole community by dividing it by the value of all of the property. So when the value of all of the property goes up, or substantially all of the property goes up, then the tendency is that the tax rate will go down. So I'd hope for some patience in understanding that. Each category of property that I just showed, an individual isn't going to get an increase based on that analysis. Every property is different. And so the calculation of each property value is going to be different as well. We're going to be having a lot of information, as typical, on our website, so that people can see the value of their properties, but importantly, be able to see the value of their neighbor's property, because that's important, and that's what most people will want to do. There'll be spreadsheets there sorted by location, by name. There's also a web lookup feature to VGSI. That's the software company that provides us our PAMA system. It also includes an online sales search capability, so that you can look for sales that are similar to your property, and hopefully help to understand the value that you would come up with. We expect we're going to have the values available in mid-September. Traditionally, we just put them online and people will come to it and consume it. This year, we're going to be sending out value change notices to everybody that gets a tax bill in the city, so that they can see what their individual value is. And rather than having to go to the website to start that process, they'll get it in the mail, and hopefully that will inspire them to look a little bit further. There will be instructions with that notice on how to find more information on the assessing website, and also how to file an abatement application if they strongly disagree with their assessment. The abatement process is there because not every assessment comes out perfectly. There are times when there are errors of calculation or errors of description, and we have a whole process, including a board of assessors, that takes up those issues and handles them in a very diligent and respectful fashion. So anybody who disagrees with their new assessment would be able to file a formal abatement request once they get the tax bill in their hand. They have to wait until they get their tax bill, and then by March 1st of 2024. That's the window of opportunity. And so that's about my presentation. I'm happy to have been here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I might.
Counselor Cheney?
I fear that I know your answer, but is there anything we can do to prevent what happened last year with some of the lakeside properties going up $10,000 to $25,000 in 1 year?
So value is a thing that we don't create. We simply interpret.
I think you misinterpreted what I'm saying. Is there anything this board can do to slow down that process or try to level it, over a period of several years? Is there anything at all we can do so we don't whack somebody with that kind of tax increase in 1 year?
Well, so I think you're doing it right now. You're doing it by staying on top of these, because those changes have been fairly dramatic in the last couple of years based on the changes of the real estate market. And, the house that you could have bought on Lake Winnisquam for $600,000 4 years ago is now $2 or $3 million. And that's the market. That's not the city, that's not this council, that's not the assessing department. That is the buyers and sellers deciding what things are worth in the marketplace. Now, spreading it out over years is what this process does, because if you had waited the 5 years from 2018 till 2023, some of those wouldn't be $10,000 or $20,000 or $25,000 increases. They'd be substantially more than that, because the increase would have happened all at once instead of being incremental. Now, if we go back and look at the results for waterfront properties, their ratio is indicating that the rate of increase, which was astronomical over the last 2 years, is beginning to level out. So I don't anticipate that there is going to be that kind of continued meteoric increase in the values or in the tax bills.
But if I may, Mr. Mayor, but assuming for the moment that we look at it and we say, oh, this is going to go up $25,000 this year, is there anything the council could do to say it's going to go up $5,000 this year, and next year it'll go up, 7? In other words, recoup it over a period of time rather than all in 1 year.
Unfortunately, this is all a system that's created by state law, and the legislature has decided, and we the people have decided in our Constitution, that this is a system that's based on market value. And so any effort to assess anything less than market value or even more than market value is going to potentially create disproportionality within the assessing system. Fairness in a tax assessing system like ours means that everybody pays the same tax based on the market value of their property. And that can be hard, because it's fair, but it's with a sharp edge, because it's not all that concerned about the affordability. And I understand your question, but the reality is it's about fairness, so that everybody, whether they have a large lakefront property or whether they have a small modest home, pays the same tax based on the value of their property.
It seems, Councilor Cheney, that your concern for taxpayers is commendable. Some of these spikes have been enormous and been gobsmacked people, but you spread out this year's tax payment over the next 5 years, they still get next year's tax bill next year.
Yes.
And then we just tag on, we divide it by 5 the year they didn't pay, and just add it on to that, so they're owing more and more. It's almost,
I understand, Mr. Mayor.
but I understand your empathy for them. If you're finished, I'll go to Councilor Lippman, because he had raised his hand. Thank you. Councilor Lippman had raised his hand, just as Councilor
Okay,
Cheney
go ahead.
raised his hand.
So regards to Mrs. Hamilton to start with. Two things, I guess, the fact that we're gonna send out advance notices is something that, I think,
Yes.
we encouraged as a result of, so people don't get a short notice to potentially have to pay additional amount if their valuation goes up. In addition to that, I guess I still would like to see us publish some directional estimates so people can have a sense based on what, because the tax rate for the city is known. We don't know what adjustments are gonna be made by DRA. But to give some perspective, I think we can do more to give the public a heads up about, directionally what things are happening with a proper qualifications that until DRA sets the tax rate, it's just an estimate.
Well, if that's something that the finance department would have available, then maybe it could be included. I'd be reluctant to try and make an estimate, because if I was off by a penny, I'd be wrong for eternity. But
Yeah.
I
guess-
I think that,
I
perhaps.
think you could
finance department would-
work with our people. You're our paid consultant, and you have the technical knowledge so that it's done properly. I know that you don't want to put your name on the estimate because it's not following your methodology, but I do think that we can do more for the public to help them understand what's going to be coming at them, understanding that this council voted for an increase below the tax cap rate most recently, and, fortunately, the inflation rate is coming down so that we should see a more modest increase. I think we're at 4.5%, 5% currently, as opposed to close to 10 last time. So I do think that, and we came in at 7-something as opposed to 10-something. So I would respectfully ask the manager and the finance director to work with you to have the tools to be able to do a little bit more than what you're proposing. And I do appreciate what you are doing, and again, regards to Mrs. Hamilton.
Well, and Counselor, it's not my reputation that I'm worried about, it's the reputation of the city's assessing department.
Yeah.
Because we get criticized for being wrong an awful lot. So the less that we can have of that, the better it is, but certainly we'll work together.
So just to be clear, I'm not saying to do it for individual properties. I'm
Exactly.
doing it in categories
Yes.
in a little greater detail than what you showed here.
In terms of value, or in terms,
And,
because
If I might.
one tax rate will be applied to all property.
no, that's not-
We understand it. I think what the counselor's trying to suggest, you mentioned that Winnisquam properties went up dramatically in value. If the city could notify the people along Winnisquam, we have noted a dramatic increase in values, which will have an impact on your taxes, at least they could start looking and saying, I better pay attention here.
One thing that I've learned is that value is not much of a surprise to people anymore. Most people know,
You weren't taking phone calls that we were taking, sir. All
Well-
due respect.
and respectfully, what they will communicate in trying to change the outcome might be different than what they have observed in their own lives. Because most people know what the properties around them are selling for. I do not anticipate, I want to make sure, Councilor Cheney and Councilor Lippman, that I do not anticipate such a dramatic increase on Winnisquam in this year.
I'm not just,
But I just want to make sure that that message doesn't leak out, thinking that there's
But
going
if,
to
but
be
if it's
some.
somewhere else.
There may
we're
be
just
some
saying
larger,
It may not need anything this year, but if 2 years from now, suddenly chicken coop property has gone through the roof, let's notify chicken coop owners.
more comment, please.
Sure. Counselor Lippman.
Again, I appreciate the fact that we're gonna send something out to consumers taxpayers on their property, as I understood what you described. but I'd respectfully ask, and I don't want to play volleyball anymore with this issue here, but I
Yep.
do think that we can do more. And I ask that you work with us as our consultant to, if you can't put your name on it, and I'm not saying because of a reputational issue, but I think we can do more to give the public a heads up what's going on. I don't want to debate it anymore.
We'll take care of it.
Fair enough. Counselor Susie?
Yes, Mr. Hamilton, a question is, and this is something, curiosity more, does your firm go around and visit different homes every year? Are each property on a cycle, like once every 5 years?
Every property has been visited over a 5-year period. The person who does the inspections is an employee of the city. And we manage and supervise the operation, but the person who's doing those inspections is a city employee.
Okay.
Additionally, properties that sell during the sale period, they get inspected as well. So that we understand what has sold and why it has a particular value.
So I've had a couple of my constituents ask me, when are they gonna come? I can't give them an answer, and I think you just answered, at least it happens at least once every 5 years.
It does. We look at 20% of the city every 5 years, or every year in that 5 years.
Is there a record of that on the card, on the
Yes,
assessment
there
card?
is. There are detailed records of all of the inspections that have occurred for a number of years on the card.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Counselor Susie. Any other questions? I'm all set. Mr. Hamilton, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate your time. Moving on to item 15, I am going to forsake my mayor's report, in light of the agenda we have in front of us, and move along to council comments. Agenda item 16. Counselor Felch?
Yes, the swan boats that are up at the weirs, they're doing well, I guess. They'd like to extend a few hours at night, and then what they want to do is light up the swans. I've seen some pictures, it looks really neat how they're lighting them up. Specifically like on fireworks nights and different nights. They're pretty much gonna stay in the same area, they won't be going out where the mount is or any further out. But that's something they're interested in doing, so I just want to bring it forward to the council.
Mr. Mayor, if I might,
Certainly.
to add to what Councilor Phelps, I spoke to the head of the Weirs Action Committee and asked for comments or concerns about this, and he told me he would get back to me if any of the members expressed concerns. I have not heard from him. So I think safely I can say WAC is, Weirs Action Committee is in support.
Thank you, Counselor Felch, and I'm certainly happy for the pedal boats and their successes. Of course, it's up to all of you, but the idea of sort of walking before we run and getting through a season, first of all, and seeing how it all goes, and also getting input from our friends at the Mount Washington, and just, I think doing some proactive outreach and asking for their thoughts on this as well, just to make sure that we don't take something that's going well right now and all of a sudden make it worse, because we thought it's a great idea, and it may very well be a great idea, but I would just suggest we measure this a couple of times. But I'm up to anything else. If you'd like to bring a motion of some sort, that's just my thoughts.
I mean, I guess we probably should reach out to the mountain, different areas out there, but it sounds like it's a good idea, and it's only a few nights, they're not gonna do it all the time, but.
Well, if it was the council's intent, it certainly could be put on the next council meeting, but a request as a formal agenda item, and request that maybe Jim Morash or someone from the organization comes in, has a chat with us and get a little broader perspective, if
Yeah,
you like.
have the city manager reach out to the organizations.
Okay. Counselor Bogart. Thank you, Counselor Felch.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a request more than anything, if you would direct the city manager to look at a crosswalk, possibly at the possibility of installing the flashing light. I understand the budget has one flashing light per year that's allocated, and I'm not sure if this has been already allocated, but I've had discussions with Counselor Haynes in this particular crosswalk because it goes between Ward 5.
Where is it, Counselor?
Wyatt Park on South Main Street. I find myself, as I and my wife go for walks every morning through that park as part of our walking routine, and crossing South Main Street at certain periods has become quite challenging, as the people seem to forget that a person in the crosswalk means stop. So, with that being said, I think one of the things, if it happens to an adult in the street, then it's gonna happen to a child. And that's all I want to say with that. But if, in talking with Counselor Haynes, he agrees that this could only promote safety for the people going to it, so.
So I would encourage maybe city manager to take a look at this situation, get some sense with two counselors from wards 5 and 4, exactly where they think it would be appropriate, and working with DPW to work up something that we could all take a look at and find out how much it's gonna cost and make sense of it. But
We can do that.
go right ahead.
I don't think we budgeted one. I don't remember that coming up
Well, it was
specifically. but I-
25,000.
Yeah, so I do think that we also have the non-capital reserve fund if we think it's an important enough safety issue to consider.
Great. Counselor Haynes?
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, I wanted to mention the Museum and Historical Society's trolley ride. My wife and I did, and grandson, and this native learned a lot, so congratulations to them. It was great. I'm hoping they do it bigger and better next year.
Great. Great. Counselor Cheney?
Thank you. I've had a request from a constituent that we supply technical support to the Conservation Commission, secretarial support, that sort of thing, if that's possible, Mr. Manager. I know it would help. The things I'm concerned about tonight, Mr. Mayor, are I'd like the ordinance committee to update our fiscal impact ordinance, because there seems to be quite a bit of confusion about what is eligible for a reduced impact fee. And how they're to be adjudicated, for lack of a better term. I would like to see us clean that ordinance up and make it more specific, so the average citizen could open the ordinance, look at it, and go, I qualify, I don't qualify, I qualify for 20%, 50%, whatever. Included, I would like the ordinance committee to look at the procedure under which the city grants tax incentives to businesses that are putting up new homes or whatever, and we give them a tax break only to find out they sell the property, so the person getting a tax break is not the person who ends up owning the property. I'd like us to see if we could put the ordinance or amend the ordinance to say the person who applies for the tax incentive must own the property for a period of years. I don't know what that period should be.
Or until they sell it. They
Yeah,
transfer.
in which case I think they ought to reimburse us if we've given them a tax incentive and they've profited from it. Lastly, I would ask that we consider as a administrative group to do some more training for our boards and commissions. I sat with a member of one of the boards recently who had no idea what 91A was. didn't know what it meant, didn't know under what circumstances he should participate or the organization should. He also had no idea, or actually she was a different person, had no idea what recusal requirements were. So I'd like us to consider putting together an annual or semi-annual training program where boards and commission members could learn the basics of being part of those boards, what their responsibilities are, and what the restrictions are on what they do.
Great idea. I see the city manager shaking his head. Is that something the municipal association
Yeah,
offers
we just
anything?
did one for all boards and commissions on 91A, maybe a newer, or they weren't able to make it or something. That, I will look for you. I believe we actually recorded that and have it available. So I'll talk to you offline and find out who it is, and we can get that. But yeah, we can certainly make this an annual, training through NHMA of some sort for different topics related to boards, commissions,
Right.
and especially as they turn over. Be glad to.
But we ought to insist that board members get the training. In other words, something,
Part of an onboarding
Right.
for
You-
new members is not a bad thing.
a checkoff that they've seen the video or whatever. Thank you.
Oh, do you have anything
Oh,
else?
no, I'll quit.
Okay. Council Cheney, in the same vein, I was wondering, you triggered this thought. I'd received I'll look at you, Councilor Felch, too. I'd received a call from residents in Ward 6. Had some questions about sidewalks and the lack of sidewalks in new developments, and how we've gotten away from them. And I drove out through the area, particularly on Route 11B between Summit Ave and the Rotary, and that's an area that I would spend a fair amount of time either walking or riding my bike, and there's no shoulder there, and we do have lots of development going in out there, and there's still no sidewalks, and it does strike me as a particularly dangerous situation, and this idea, and this constituent of yours mentioned it to me, there's concern about sidewalks to nowhere, which is a clever term that I think is completely idiotic, quite frankly, because a sidewalk that's dead end initially, if it's connected with another sidewalk, well, now we've got two links of sidewalks. And it's not about where does it actually go necessarily, it's about when you're in that area, how safe are you to be out of the road? And if it's part of our obligation in the city to make sure they are maintained over time for public safety, it seems to me something that maybe it doesn't necessarily land in our purview, but something that maybe we should discuss a little more, because I just see an awful lot of work going on out there, and the pavement is broken off as it leads into the green area, and there's no way to traverse it at all, and I find that to be too bad. So I'm just throwing it out there for you. Thoughts?
If I might, Mr. Mayor, as the council's representative to the planning board, I have sat through a number of meetings where requests were made to waive the requirement of pavement because it would be a sidewalk to nowhere. And those have had some success in the past. Myself and several other members have started to balk at the idea of automatically waiving the requirement that you install sidewalks. An example is the campground that's being proposed for across from the Tamarack. They're saying, well, it's out at the end of the town and there's, no reason to put a sidewalk in. We said, you have to put it in because someday it'll connect to Fun Spot and the bar and other entertainment things up in that area. And I think the board now is beginning to see we should do it. I know the Public Works Director is going to try to run me over in the parking lot for saying these things, but, and I understand.
But you know what it is that, with all due respect to our directors, we set policy.
Yeah.
Planning board sets policy. Not necessarily directors, and I think we all appreciate the input from our professionals in the city, but ultimately, this strikes me as something that we should be more concerned about.
And we owe that department and others the resources to do whatever they have to do.
Sure.
But we shouldn't give up the sidewalks because it's a a difficulty for them.
Yeah, and I shouldn't have said idiotic. I could have used a better term than that, because I'm sure people have thought about this and
I'm with you.
disagree with me, but sometimes it just strikes me as odd, and anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
So, yeah, I totally agree, especially in high-traffic areas and whatnot. We definitely need to start working on getting more sidewalks in. And I know what you're talking about is definitely should be needed. But in the training situation that you were talking about also, I've got a street right now that they want, the planning board voted for them to put in this sidewalk, and it's in a neighborhood with no sidewalks, a dead-end road, and they're requiring them to put in a sidewalk. So there has to be a balance there. And, you know,
The question becomes, if I may, Mr. Mayor, what happens when suddenly it continues on or connects?
well, if you're in a neighborhood like that, there's already, the neighborhood's already developed. So what's the odds of another extension of that sidewalk ever going in again? You know, you gotta look at that too.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I mean, nonetheless, the stretch of road that this constituent contacted me about, I can see over the past few years, the amount of development that's gone on, and there are no sidewalks. And I just don't
Right, and
understand
I
why we
totally
never
agree
did
with that. Like I said, high-traffic areas, yeah, definitely.
In high-traffic areas in the Tamarack area, we certainly had someone hit
Yeah.
Yeah,
during
it was-
motorcycle
yeah.
week there.
Yeah,
You know,
motorcycle week.
not that they necessarily would have been on the sidewalk, but they could have, the idea that we don't have it strikes me as
Oh,
particularly
definitely.
odd.
Yeah.
So, that was my 2 cents on that, thanks. Any other council comments? How about committee reports? Council Whitman.
Yes, the Finance Committee met before this meeting, and has a recommendation to the full council, and that is specifically has to do with, the replacement of, at least 2 of our ambulances. And we've, are recommending to give the manager and the chief, direction to come back with a proposal based on a competitive bid process, not just taking into account the just the absolute cost, but the financing terms and different ways that we can structure it, potentially even combining it with our fire truck purchase or looking at that, but basically coming back with some options for us based on a competitive bid process.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership on that, Counselor. Counselor Susie.
From the Appointments Committee, as most people have probably seen, we've been doing a lot of advertising through the assistance of the city manager's office. We have a number of board positions coming up presently, or open right now today. And as soon as we receive a few, we will have another Appointments Committee, go through the interview process, and bring stuff to the council.
Great. Any liaison reports as well? Nothing? Okay, moving on to agenda item number 19, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. If there's a current agenda item that you'd like to speak to, now would be the appropriate time.
That worked well.
Dr. Patterson, if you'd like to come up, and I think that item is on the agenda if you wanted to
Yes.
speak. To it.
So I'm wanting to hear what's going on with Pickle
Okay.
Pond Road before I comment on it, if that's possible.
We'll figure out a way to make sure that your thoughts are heard. Anyone else like to speak to a matter that is currently on the agenda, current agenda items? Seeing none, I'll move on. Oh, come on up, I'm sorry about that.
You were right first. Never mind, sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I don't know if now is the appropriate time, but it is on the Pickle Pond Road matter. I would also request that, after hearing, I don't know a whole lot about it. I did talk to my councilman about it.
Would you mind introducing yourself? and
Yes,
Maybe
I
just telling us
apologize.
where you live.
My name is Dave Willett. I live on Pickerel Pond. I've lived in the city for over 60 years, and I've owned property on Pickerel Pond for better than 35 years.
Thank you.
I own a fair amount of road frontage on Pickerel Pond Road, and have some more questions than anything to ask the council and yourself. There again, I'm outside of my wheelhouse here, so I don't know if this is the appropriate time, or if I'm better off hearing the discussion on the matter and then addressing my questions then.
Maybe if you've got a couple of questions that you can pose right now, we may not be able to answer them right now. In fact, but something for us to take into consideration when we get to that.
Very good. I
Is
would
that
do
okay?
My first question was answered on notification of the people that live on the road, and I guess I have to pay more attention when I read the Daily Sun, not just on the obituaries, but on the minutes of the meetings, and so I'll make a
Don't forget the
point
letters to
do
the
that.
editor.
My understanding is that some documents were brought to the city on the ownership of the road, and then it was determined by the city legal counsel that these documents didn't meet the requirements to say that the city owned the road. And I may be wrong in that assumption, but my question would be, would the city consider, or the council consider, having an outside entity, law firm, look at these documents to see if they hold their weight? That would be one question. The second question is, and it's a little delicate, but is it typical that the city of Laconia would purchase property on a private road? And I ask the question because the city of Laconia purchased property on Pickerel Pond Road within the last 5 years, and not only purchased property, but put in approximately a 2,000 square foot gravel parking lot and signage that says City of Laconia property, and it discussed what the use of the property is for. I scratch my head and say, if Pickerel Pond is in a city road, why would the city buy property on a private road?
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe that's just the way my thought works, and I'm not saying I'm right, I just have that concern.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me address the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Now you know why I said don't let him speak.
Question?
We're
Any-
good friends.
In your mind. Anyways, anyone else like to speak to this agenda item, which is citizens' request to comment on current agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move along to number 20, which is the city manager's report. Turn it over to our city manager.
In a turn of events, Councilor Cheney asked me to keep this short, so,
I threatened him, actually.
but we do have 3 documents, so I will move relatively quickly, because a lot of this is, some of it's repetitive, so I will keep it short, and you can certainly ask questions or see me at any time. Building construction did increase. We were down a little bit. Your first section is your financial and operational trends page. The current year is in line with what it was 2 years ago and not too far off last year. So even though we took a little dip at the beginning of the construction season, we do see an increase in building construction as we go through the summer. Fire had a busy month. Public assistance data, you'll notice that we did, we budget for $40,000 in welfare costs. Currently, as it stands right now, we did overspend that a little bit, but those numbers aren't finalized at the end of the year, so they do adjust a little bit. And as you recall, we did increase that number to 50,000 next year anyhow, as a way to put more money into city relief.
In some respects, it's offset by 2022, which, right? But it's another story nonetheless.
Yep. And some of those are put out, some of those are vouchers that we have out there that aren't cashed in yet. They may or may not get cashed in, so those numbers aren't necessarily finalized for a while. Police is online with where they normally are at this time. Property tax collection, this actually came from the July 10th, so I don't have, even though normally I would have done this July 10th, we're a few weeks later. We didn't get the exact numbers, but we assume that percentage is a little bit increased to where we are, where it shows right now. Motor vehicle registrations went over what we budgeted for last year, estimated in our revenues from last year. Overtime didn't really change too much. What we saw in overtime last year, we kind of knew where we would see that in the places where there were a lot of vacancies where extra work had to be done. Going on, again, I'm not trying to move too quick, but I know there's a lot on the agenda, so please slow me down if you need me to. Parks and Rec facilities are right on line where they normally are. Impact fees, relatively unchanged. We do have two different items tonight. One of the things that, just to say publicly, is that you've asked me, when we're looking at funding different projects, to make sure we are looking at the impact fees. We have two different projects that we'll talk about tonight that do include using impact fees towards those projects. Turning the page, boat taxes, we did see a decrease at the end of FY '23 in what we budgeted to what we actually made, and I think we're just seeing, the economy is changing, and we're seeing less boat sales, and that's where that stands. The revenues were over the expenditures, so I'll just keep that simple. That's what we want to see. And the EMS billing report is included. Unless there's something specific. Again, slow me down if you need me to.
I have one question,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor. I recently heard the state was talking about changing it so cities and towns wouldn't get boat taxes. There was some bill.
There was a bill that didn't go through, I don't
Didn't?
believe.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't believe that went through. No, did it go through?
No, I don't believe it went through. I just think what a bad bill.
Oh, yeah, no, I was gonna say, I don't.
I can't believe anyone would vote for it. But anyway, maybe, anyway.
You don't want the money to come into your community. That's what a yes vote would.
I'm sure there are plenty of communities don't see a dime
Yeah,
of it anyway
yeah.
because you don't register your boats, but nonetheless.
Yep. I'm gonna go through real quick on the Laconia projects section, which is your next document, unless there's anything that jumps out at you. Road construction is continuing. You've seen the work all over town. Projects are moving along well. I think that, we haven't run into any issues other than rain, which has changed our paving schedules on about a daily basis, but with a couple weeks worth of sunshine, I think we're gonna be able to finish that up. We're expecting the Highland Street Bridge project to start the second week of August. Certainly this one will cause some traffic issues, especially with that road. Highland Street is a pretty busy road, whether you get into the hospital or across town or whatever. So we will make sure that that's well noticed and signed. Messer Street Bridge is moving along a little faster than expected. Hopefully that means it keeps going that way. We were able to grab some extra contractors because some other municipal projects weren't ready to go, so they sent them over and they're working with us, so that's moving along as well. I'm just gonna keep moving on. The only last thing I'll just talk about is the Native American sculpture is continuing on, and they're in the process now of painting. I think we're getting close to painting, yeah. So, hopefully that moves along quickly as well. The last document I have for you is the monthly economic report. The unemployment information was not available yet, but we do know we've continuously seen the decrease statewide, and nothing would have changed. We just don't have that information as of yet. And on your last page, the second page of that is the CPI numbers down to 3 now for June, annualizing out at 4.2%. So we're a year now of month-to-month decrease. It's been over a year since the last time we saw it not decrease. So we'll continue to see how that goes. The only other thing I was gonna mention, Counselor Susie did mention it, is that there is a number of board and commission vacancies throughout the city. And we have our elected position filing period starting August 2nd through the 11th. We've been putting all the boards and commissions on the website, on the links. It's been in the paper. The Daily Sun is coming in on Thursday, meet with Katie and I to do a story on this. So we're trying to get those, not only for our boards and commissions, our elected positions, we're just trying to garner more interest, and hopefully we can get a full slate of people to come in front of the appointments committee. That is all I have.
Thank you, Kirk. Any questions for the city manager?
Great.
Seeing none, let's move on to new business. Item number 21, 21A, proposed amendments to the wage and compensation plan and the rules and regulations. Kirk, would you be so kind as to walk us through this?
Sure. So wage and compensation plan is due for an adjustment. There's really three parts to this. Number one is the annual COLA that gets factored in. The wage and compensation, as a reminder, it affects those, for the most part, we'll say non-union employees. There's a couple departments that operate a little bit differently, but for the most part, that's the easier way of saying it. It includes most of our department heads, their assistants, a lot of people that work here in City Hall. So it affects a number of people. The collective bargaining agreements for a number of years, and probably 2 or 3 contracts now, have gone to a system where the COLAs are based on a 1 to 3% increase based on the CPI number. So if it's above 3%, it's 3% would be their COLA, and that's what we put in for the wage and compensation employees as well. That is not something you need to vote on tonight. That it was taken care of previously, but I just wanted to give you what the number is. Second piece of it is the longevity adjustment that we put in through the budget this year, and you've heard me talk about it in the past during my budget presentation. Those employees that are covered by the wage and compensation plan, as well as our union who have in their contracts that they fall under whatever the city's longevity plan is, would be affected by this. So it's really a large number, if not all of our employees throughout the city that would be affected by the longevity adjustment. That longevity bonus that we give is included in here. We normally give I won't break down each individual one, but as an example, if you're 5 years of credible service, 5 through 9 years, you would get $30 for your longevity in the current plan. We've adjusted that to go to 1 day pay plus a personal day.
$30 per year of service, is that right?
No,
The old plan, no,
$30 if you're in a 5 to 9 year window.
okay.
So you'd get it once a year for years 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So, but it's just $30. It's not 30 times whatever your total year number is. So we've adjusted that, and it goes up through you get 1 through 5 days if you've been here for over 25 years. It was something we factored into the budget this year. There was, if you remember back to during the budget presentation, it was in contingency in the city manager's administration portion of the budget. Once this is approved, we will push that out to its correct departments because it comes out of their individual budgets, and then moving forward, that would just be included in their budget. The third piece of it is an adjustment to the wage and compensation minimum and maximums. Historically, and I don't have the last time we did something different, the change to the minimums and maximums of what a pay scale is for an employee who under this plan is only adjusted by the COLA. So if your minimum was X dollars and the COLA changes it, that's how we make those adjustments. This year, what we went in and did is we made an adjustment to the minimum and maximums for each of those employees based on an average of a couple of the union contracts. The 4 unions that signed last year, the contracts, 2 of them were a little bit difficult to try to use averages because there was so many adjustments made. 2 of them were a lot easier in figuring out, okay, this is what a change to their union contracts, minimum and maximums look like, and we applied that accordingly in here, increasing our minimums by 8% and our maximums by 7.5%. 2 reasons. One is to increase the minimums as we're trying to hire recruitment, and the maximums as a retention tool to try to get them to a higher level. And so each time a COLA is applied, or each time we try to increase the, we sign a union contract and we look at our wage and compensation. If we're going to make adjustments, it moves them up accordingly. This was presented to all the employees that were represented under this plan. They had time to read it and make comment. I know we've had discussions on this. We had a few members questioned if it was doing enough to make the adjustments. We've had those conversations. I think part of this is being able to start now, and as adjustments get made in the future, and these aren't forgotten about as they move forward, I think we'll see those increase as well. And so this is the plan that I'm proposing in front of you today. The members have seen it, and now it's in front of you guys for approval or not.
Counselor Susie.
I'm not sure if this is the right time. We had a discussion earlier this evening for a couple minutes. Go for it. Okay? But one of the things that I brought up after reading this, and I know other members of the council probably received letters from employees of the city and stuff like that here and there. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was that about a year from now, maybe a year and a half from now, we're gonna be looking at future contracts with our unions, our employees, and all this and that. And talking to the city manager, and I know talking also to Councilor Cheney, thought it was a good idea that we as a council look forward to having an outside contractor or a public employee company or something like that, look at what is guidelines, where do we sit on all the scales, because the city manager is gonna have a very difficult job coming ahead, looking forward to that time. And maybe I didn't explain it correctly, and I'll look to Councilor Cheney if he wants to add any comments. But I think it'd be.
So you're making a request that the city consider hiring some form of consultant to do an analysis of all city wages to find out where how we stand to like-sized communities throughout the state?
Plus, also give our city manager and our finance director as much data and information they would need, because as they need time, and we're not that far away when you start thinking about it, when some of these contracts are gonna be coming up and coming due.
Okay. Counselor Cheney.
I think, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I think our intent was to motion to approve the plan that the manager has proposed and add to that an amendment that the council instruct the manager to find an independent agency, group, whatever, to do a wage and compensation study that he should bring back to the council for approval, the picking of that group.
Do you want to commingle this, or would you think it's best to keep it clean with two separate motions? I think two, and I'd like to, the one that you're talking about, I'd like to have some comment on, if we could. Please do. Because I think this plan becomes effective if we don't vote on it within 30 days. Typically, the managers have asked us to do that so that they can continue to work on the administration of it, and I have no objection to that part. I do think that the labor markets that we're facing are much different than the old days, where you could take the time to do a very detailed study, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just thinking that we need to be more dynamic with respect to anticipating where labor markets are going. And typically, often in industry, salaries are set based on benchmark positions. So one position in relationship to another, I think you can shorten the process of getting information by identifying those benchmark positions, and you can do that with a consultant, but I think they're somewhat obvious in many instances, and to do something that can be done more quickly than something that takes a long time. And that would be my comment to kind of what you guys have laid out. Directionally, I'm where you're at, but I think it's a cycle that we may need to repeat more often, given where the labor markets are.
I think, if I may, Mr. Mayor, I think our discussion was that we hire someone to get this done between now and the next negotiation period. And we wouldn't anticipate it taking an extended period of time to come through and look at these. I may be wrong, and we would find out when we seek someone to do this, but I'd like to just have some folks come in and describe what they could do, and a time frame, because I agree with everything you just said, Henry. I think the market's moving too fast, but we need to know where to start.
What could be produced in the next 6 months may not be relevant a year from that period. And I think that's where we, so preparing for this, so I would say the idea is good. It needs a little time to germinate a bit here and figure out a course of action. We have to figure out the timeliness of it as well, to put it in place so the data we get back is truly helpful. It's not dated, right?
My recommendation for an amendment didn't say starting tomorrow afternoon. I just would like the council to look at the idea and pursue it, have the manager pursue it. and
So
make a
perhaps we could
presentation.
look at this, if you don't mind, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, no,
Perhaps
you're
we
not.
can vote on this as an individual item.
Okay.
All right, and then let's put this on the next agenda sometime in the month of August.
Fine.
And
We have some
let's
time.
just think about how we want to lay this out and maybe a quick time frame of when we would start the process, whether it be with MRI or some other group like that, or Primex. Maybe even Primex might be able to do this as well. And but I think it's a great idea. I just want to make sure that the data we're collecting is timely.
I don't disagree with one word of that, and I have made the motion to approve the plan, so forget the other part.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. Kirk?
I was just gonna say that I think that just listening to the conversations that are going on and in conversations that we've had, I do think they're two silos that work very closely with each other. I'm over a year and a half from negotiating contracts, so that study could be a longer term, but I think what Council Littman is saying, if we can benchmark something a little bit quicker and sooner, especially focusing on what we're looking at here with their wage and compensation employees, we have time to roll that into a bigger project and make this a phased approach that helps everybody time-wise going through.
I hate to draw the analogy, but we review 20% of the homes every year. So in 5 years, we've covered all the positions. It's that same kind of approach that we have to keep on testing the market because real estate's gone crazy. In some sense, so has the labor market.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table made by Counselor Cheney, seconded by Counselor Susie. Is there any further discussion on the motion? And the motion is to approve the proposed amendments to the wage and compensation plan and the rules and regulations as presented. No further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you. Item number 21B is the discussion of the ownership and maintenance of Pickerel Pond Road.
Mr. Mayor, I asked to be allowed to recuse myself as I live on Pickerel Pond Road, and I'm not, on the advice of private counsel, I should have recused myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Counselor Cheney has recused himself from discussion of the ownership and maintenance of Pickerel Pond Road. Kirk, can you give us an update
Sure.
on this?
So following our last meeting, when new information was brought forward, we brought that information to our land use attorneys. We also had some updated information from the state archives that they were looked at. They came back with a very similar idea, that the inconsistency in the information is not enough for them to determine that it's clear, understand that these roads as presented and what is sitting there today are the same. So they're continuing with the stance of that they can't prove that it's a public road
Okay.
and the same one that was looked at a long time ago.
All right, so on advice of city council, no, not city council, city attorney, legal opinion on this is there's not clear and convincing evidence that this is in fact a public road. Is that what I
Correct.
understand what you're saying?
I
Hold on one
don't
second. Hold
think
on.
that
Go
that's
ahead.
what they concluded.
But Counselor, I just wanted to make sure I understood him, but go right ahead and speak.
That's why I'm understanding their report.
You don't read the report in the same way?
I don't, I think what they're saying is they can't prove it one way or
Right.
the other, but then you add to the preponderance of, which was a good point made by one of the speakers earlier, that we've put a park on that road, and how do you access that city park without crossing a private road, which it's not. I mean, I think, there's a policy decision here. It isn't a legal decision. It's a policy decision, and I think the council has the right to make that policy decision based on the evidence that's there and the past activities that have gone on that road, to look at it differently than just a pure, I can't prove it one way or the other, so it's not.
Yeah, and I don't really know what the standard of proof is in something like this that dates back to what year, Dr. Patterson?
It was 1790, I think,
Right. So, the idea that this would be absolutely clear cut was really far-fetched in the first place, but I agree with Councilor Littman. This is a policy decision. And I think we have behaved in such a way over the past few years with Pickerel Pond and the parking lot, and we've treated it as a public road. The idea that we'd walk away from this seems inconsistent, incongruent to me. And I also think that this is, those of you who've traveled this road before, it's got some issues, and we should be concerned about that.
So-
Next, okay.
Yeah, I agree with Henry. It's a road we've maintained forever, before 1948, for 20 years, which is one of the guidelines. We've accepted some roads in Laconia as is, and I think this is one of those roads that we need to accept as is.
Councilor Susie.
I agree with what Councilor Felch is saying. Hard for him to accept that, but I believe we've had this road for probably a couple of 100 years, okay? And we maintain it, take care of it. It does need a lot of work. We'll probably have to work with the landowners who abut the road on timing to bring it up to whatever code the city has to do. But if you ask me I'd vote in favor of accepting it as a public road.
So I just want to make sure it's as simple as putting a motion on the table to accept it as a public road.
No, and
Yeah, I wouldn't think, but I would be glad to take that piece and say, this is the direction that the council has given me to our lawyers, say, this is the direction, and then come back with that piece of it, as opposed to what I was asked to look last time, say, okay, now this is what they're moving on, and get that opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel comfortable with that.
I think the consensus is there, that's what we need to do, so.
Maybe even unanimity, I think, as well. So
Yeah.
I think that's the next step, okay, to take that step. Yes, Councilor Littman.
One other justification, which we've used to look at other roads, is that it's a very important cut through to another main thoroughfare. And, to me, it's,
Everything
I
leads
appreciate
that
what the
way.
mayor said in terms of
Yeah.
where we should go with this.
Okay. So, Councilor Bogart.
So at this point, since we're looking for the city manager to do further information search for us, do we table this item until the?
There's no motion right now. There was no motion scheduled on this. I'm not sure we have to table it right
No,
now.
there was
I think
no
we can.
vote.
Very
yeah.
good.
So I think we just move it along.
Let's put it on the next agenda.
Yep. We'll put it on the next agenda. So I think the next step is going to be taking that first step to declaring it a public road and then going from there. I'm still happy to integrate you into this conversation if you would like to, Dr. Patterson.
I would just add that if
Step up and introduce yourself, sorry.
Brian Patterson, I'm a resident of Pickerel Pond Road, or on Pickerel Pond Road of Laconia. Wanted to just say, if there is more required, can the attorney let us know what is necessary to prove this to their level of acceptance if we can't just approve it by city council?
You know what, I don't think it's up to them, quite frankly. And I think we're gonna get another non-answer, quite frankly. And so I would rather just, look, this is a policy decision, as Council Littman said. I think we make the decision based on all the evidence available to us that this is a public road, and we're going to take it as a public road. Just let us get our proper protocol in place and do so. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome back, Councilor Cheney. Moving on to item number 21C, request, which is a request to designate odd-numbered side of Academy Square's southern leg, a no parking area from Academy Street to the western boundary of lot at 17 Academy Street. Kirk, would you like to just lead us through a discussion on this right now?
Sure. So Councilor Haynes asked us to go down and take a look at the Academy Square. If you're facing the courthouse, it would be the right-hand driveway as it makes its horseshoe. He was getting complaints and concerns of cars parking along the right-hand side of that road. They back out of the courthouse parking lot. It's narrow enough as it is, and now you had a legally parked cars and then not illegally parked, but cars parked on the curbing as well, vehicles parked there, and it was becoming a hazard. So the request is to just that right-hand side of the horseshoe on that south piece is to make that no parking on the right-hand side. Certainly, it's still the parking lot for the courthouse is available.
Okay. Excuse me. So, right now, there's a proposed motion. I'm looking for someone to move the motion, which is to approve designating the numbered side of the southern leg of Academy Street, no parking, from Academy Street to the western boundary of the lot at 17 Academy Square. So moved by Counselor Haynes, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Counselor Felch.
Go ahead.
I was looking left.
Thank you, Councilor Welch. I just want to make sure that any of these things that we've given it the proper vetting in terms of when we're making a change like that, to make sure that the residents and such have been adequately noticed before we conclude.
They were noticed. We sent letters to everybody, and actually we sent the updated letter because it was going to be on the 10th, so we sent 2 letters to them, and they were noticed.
Okay.
And no one's come forward.
I have not heard anything. No one's called my office.
So I just wonder how this situation came about so at this time when there's been, how many years have this been parking there? Has there been any accidents? Why all of a sudden is this a problem after how many years? And right now, we've got so much, I've seen the courthouse when it's full, and they're backed up all the way up the other end of Academy Street. So I don't know about taking away parking in an area that's.
Would you like to address that?
Sure.
Counselor
The only thing
Haynes?
I can tell you is the city manager and the police chief and I looked at it, and if you get vehicles parked alongside, the left-hand side of it's almost, with people parking up against the curbing, it's almost impossible to get out. And the other thing we didn't look at is you have to be careful that it kind of shows it on the map, but there's a dirt road that's used as an access to South Main Street and Vista. So that incurred that. It was just brought to my attention, to be honest with you, it was brought to my attention by a couple of law enforcement officers that had a real problem with trying to get out of there.
Oh, and that's fine. I was just wondering why all of a sudden it became an issue.
Well, I was going to add, 30 or 40 years ago, when I was going down there routinely, it was a problem then, and as the counselor says, I guess nobody complained, but trying to back out of the spaces became an issue if people were parked there.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. I'd like to move on to agenda item number 21D. Repurpose the remaining funds from the 1.6 million road bond approved by Resolution 2020-17. Kirk, would you touch on that for us, please?
In 2020, the council approved a $1.6 million road bond, as it says in the first paragraph there, for a number of streets in the Lakeport area, to have sidewalk upgrade, reconstruction of some streets, drainage work. So there was a lot of work being done. All that work has been completed. It's passed its punch list. Everything is done, and it's good to move on. There's just under $72,000 remaining in that road construction bond. And Public Works Director has asked that we take that remaining money in the bond and move it into other work that's being done in the Lakeport area, specifically Paugus Street, which has got a project coming up.
Okay.
Make that motion.
All right, so the motion to move the city, motion for the city council to approve the repurposing of the remaining funds in the 1.6 million road bond approved by resolution 2020-17 to reconstruct Paugus Street. So made by Councilor Lippman, seconded by Councilor Cheney. Is there any further discussion about this? Go right ahead.
Yes. I was wondering if that included the work that was done on Elm Street and also the work that's being done Sheridan North and Belvedere.
That's not that project, right? No,
Not on Elm, not on.
different project.
The Elm Street one that's been done to date was sewer, and so is Belvedere, Sheridan, and North. So this is strictly the road, this is just the road surface ones. In this case, for Paugus, it's basically a reconstruction.
Okay, so it comes to the point where Elm Street still isn't done from all the work they've been doing for,
They're scheduled to pave Elm Street, and we met last Thursday, said about 2 weeks then.
okay, thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 21E, Councilor Felch has requested an update and discussion regarding current regulations governing fireworks in the city of Laconia as compared to other New Hampshire communities. Looks like it was requested that you do a little research on this.
Did a little research. Chief Joubert and I had discussed, and he did some research as well. So, yeah, the question was, where do we stand as far as restrictions with fireworks in the city? And a lot of it comes from multiple nights. The fireworks are related to homeowner fireworks. We are relatively unrestricted in what we do. We don't have time necessarily restrictions. There are some noise restrictions, but it's not the same as a fireworks restriction. Our neighboring communities, most of them have some form of a restriction, whether it be time, day of week, that you're allowed to do it. Using Franklin as an example, they don't allow it Monday through Thursday. It's a weekend thing unless it's a holiday. They require it on weekends. So it is something we can certainly look at. My recommendation after doing the research and talking to a few people would be to send this to the Government Operations Committee to let them look at it. I mean, it's certainly up to you, but I think that would give us a chance to bring in some different ordinances that other communities are using and make a decision on if they want to move forward with that.
Brilliant. I think we're going to assign that to the government operations. and
I'll
ordinances.
ask the city manager to work with us.
I have no doubt he would, but certainly.
Thank you, sir.
What am I doing? I missed that.
Working very closely with that guy. Yeah.
We just volunteered.
Oh,
That's
great,
just-
thank you. Chief Joubert-
That's just assumed. with
Chief
everything.
Joubert would love to help out with whatever. See how that
Right.
rolls?
So done.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, item number 21F, the request to authorize the city manager to enter into a 1-year extension of an existing cable television franchise agreement between the city and Cogeco US, NH Maine, LLC, DBA Breezeline.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this? Counselor Lippman?
Can I get an explanation a little bit further from what I read here that, the reason for extension is the poor customer service, but yet we wanted, meaning we, the consortium, wanted to extend it for 5 years and Breezeline wants it for 1 year. What's going on here?
If you don't mind me turning to.
Flipped, it was what I would, yeah.
Finance director sits on the consortium for the
Great.
city.
The way the agreement is written, the 5-year extension, which would essentially be a new contract under the same terms of the existing contract, can only be done by mutual consent. And that was not approved. The
Not my
1-year
question-
extension.
Not my question.
Oh.
Why would we propose to do a 5-year when we're the customer, the city and our residents have the concern with the service?
we're doing a 1 year.
We're
doing a
recommending.
1 year.
We're recommending a 1
We're
year.
recommending a 1 year.
We had, not
Right.
recommended, they recommend a 1 year. We had requested a 5 year, which struck me as odd as I read that, instead of a 1 year. But they said that Breeze Line wants a 1 year.
And what's behind their wanting a 1 year, because they're looking to renegotiate the agreement to less favorable terms to the city?
Well, I can't speak for them, but I think that's generally perceived to be the case.
You're so cynical, Counselor.
So why would we mutually consent to 1 year? I mean, I guess what's the rush to do this if?
Legal counsel.
Yeah, it's recommended by the council, hired by the consortium. I think part of also the concern was a reluctance to negotiate a new contract at a time when Breeze Line is already not in compliance with the existing contract. I keep in mind, these negotiations started more than about a year ago, and at the time, there was a lot of discussion about the effects of COVID on their business operations and such. That's kind of winding down, and improvements, I mean, and situation has improved, but I think it's the opinion of the consortium that they have not improved nearly enough as far as wait times and customer service as to where they need to be. And
I'm not satisfied, honestly, in terms of not with, I believe what you're telling me is your answer. I'm not upset with what you're saying, but I'm upset that we would extend an agreement when they're not complying with the current agreement.
That's right. Right, I agree. If they're,
What's the consequence of not approving this, is I guess my next question.
well, the current agreement will end on December 31st, or does end on December 31st.
What's the
At which
consequence?
point we would be negotiating from scratch for a new 10-year agreement. The opinion of the consortium members were that would be in a better position to try to push for Breeze Line to come into compliance with the existing agreement before, while it's still in place, before we essentially even out the playing field and start from scratch, where there is no guarantee, for example, under a new agreement that the customers would receive a real person within several minutes after calling, for example. That is written into the contract. That wouldn't necessarily be written into a future contract. Another item is, we're going back and forth on what does it mean to have a local presence And as you know, as you may know, during COVID, the Belmont office for Breeze Line closed and has not reopened. And the discussion is going back and forth as to whether the existing office in Rochester, which is the closest office, counts as a local office or not. If we were to, I think the idea is that we're in a better negotiating position to stay in a situation where there's a contract that specifies a local office, as opposed to on January 1st being in a position where there really is no agreement in place one way or the other.
Breeze Line isn't the only opportunity we have here, right? We have another contract with another provider.
We also have a franchise agreement with Comcast, that's correct.
Right. So, and Comcast meets the terms of the agreement?
To the best of my knowledge, we do that, I mean, I've been focusing on the Breeze Line agreement because that's where the
Right.
contract renewal is. If there are similar complaints about Comcast services, they haven't come to my attention yet.
I don't know why we agree.
Counselor.
I agree with what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from as far as extending a contract now, so we have better negotiations. But where are we at with getting them to comply? How do we get them to comply? And what's the penalty if they don't?
The only stick we have
Is there anything in the contract for that type of stuff now?
I think the most I'd want to say right now is that our attorneys are working on that. You know, there is action taking place to the extent that they are not complying with the contract.
And if we don't have that stuff in the contract now, let's make sure it's there in the next contract.
That would be the goal.
It seems to me they're not complying, they're blaming COVID-19 and workforce issues as to why people are waiting several hours on the phone. This year extension strikes me as a lifeline for them to get back in compliance, to put them in a stronger position to negotiate a new contract, which may not be in the best interest of the city. So I'm wondering whether we should table this and perhaps request a non-public session for legal strategy with counsel.
I make a motion to table.
Second.
All those in favor? 6 votes in the affirmative. That passes. The item is tabled. Thank you. So it will stay on the agenda going forward, and Glenn, maybe we can just confer at some point in the coming weeks as to
Absolutely.
opportunity to chat with council on this, okay? So, thanks. All right. Item number 21G, which is Resolution 2023-17, request to submit a grant application on behalf of Lakes Region Community Developers relating to the demolition of a dilapidated building at 1719 Bay Street. I think most of you are familiar with. It's a burnt-out structure. Kirk, would you like to just walk us through that, please?
So that we have an opportunity through the Invest in H money. Part of the money that was dedicated to that was for demolition of properties that could not be rehabilitated as long as they were going to be used. That property was going to be used for housing. Lake Street Community Developers came forward, and as we know, they've gone through the planning board and zoning boards now to try to get approval for a project to build on that site. If they get the approvals that they need through planning, zoning, and the project is approved, they will then take ownership of that property. We've already have a grant that ready to go, ready to be submitted. Invest in H isn't obviously going to really even look at it until they're the full owners of it. But once that happens, we would be able to move that forward. Again, this is, and I put this in the agenda staff report. This is not in any way supporting what the project is. This is simply saying if they get their approvals and they own the property and they're able to build, then we're going to help them out by being the municipality has to apply for the grant, and that's what we will do.
Okay, so there's zero fiscal impact on the city.
Correct.
And it's contingent on them owning the property and going forward with a project.
We're just a pass-through of the money. Yep.
Okay, all right. Any questions of Kirk at this point? We're looking for a series of 3 motions right now. The first one is to move a waiver reading of Resolution 2023-17 in its entirety and to read by title only, so made by Councilor Cheney, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. Next, we're looking for to move a first reading of Resolution 2023-17 relative to authorizing the city manager to submit a grant application on behalf of Lakes Region Community Developers and to accept and expend the grant in the amount of $60,000 relating to the demolition of a dilapidated building at 1719 Bay Street. So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Haynes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, looking to move to schedule a public hearing on August 14, 2023, during the regular city council meeting to gather input prior to any action being taken. So made by Councilor Felch, seconded by Councilor Cheney. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Thank you. Item 21H, we addressed earlier, the Laconia Airport Authority and the DOT. Item number 21I, which is use of impact fees to fund the conversion of a tankless water heater at the library. Laconia Public Library is requesting use of impact fees in the amount of $4,778.33 to be used for the electrical portion of converting the tankless water heater in the family restroom to a tank water heater to meet the increased demand for hot water brought about by higher children's room usage. Funds are available within the library's impact fee allocations to offset the project. The library is requesting the use of the funds. Approval of this request will reduce the amount of impact fee funds available to the library by $4,778.33, leaving a balance of $17,630.51. This report was submitted by Kirk Biotti, and he recommends allocating said fees as proposed. Right now, looking for a motion to move to approve the use of impact fees to fund the conversion of a tankless water heater at the Laconia Public Library, so made by Counselor Littman, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Moving along to item 21J, which is fun. New Hampshire Vintage Vinyl, Canal Street Block Party. Temporary traffic orders being requested in its 2023-12 for the Canal Street Summer Block Party event. Dan McLaughlin of New Hampshire Vintage Vinyl has been with us this evening, has requested the closure of Canal Street in conjunction with a Canal Street Summer Block Party. The event will be held Saturday, August 19th, 2023, from 5 to 9 p.m. It will close this TTO will close Canal Street beginning at 4 p.m. The Colonial Theater schedule shows they do not have a performance booked on August 19th. The organizer of the event was asked to contact Canal Street businesses regarding closure of the street. Businesses that were contacted were Dobbs Cobbler Shop, Cog Sushi Mart, Piedmont Print and Frame, H-Bear Studio, Penny Patu Travel, and Trillium Farm to Table. All of the businesses indicated they approved the event and the street closure. Also attaches the map showing the layout of the event. The outreach to the businesses on Canal Street, greatly appreciated. I'm sure they felt appreciated and validated because they've had some concerns. So, Special Events Review Committee has scheduled this request for their August 2nd, 2023 meeting. Included in the motion below is language for the council's consideration to approve the request pending approval by the Special Events Review Committee at that meeting. Right now, looking for a motion to move to approve temporary traffic order 2023-12 for the Canal Street Summer Block Party event to be held August 19, 2023, and to allow alcohol consumption on city property in the designated areas only, pending approval of the request at the Special Events Review Committee meeting August 2nd, 2023. I assume there'll be dancing as well, so I just want you all to be aware of that. Go ahead, yes. How about you have a question once we move the motion? We move the motion? So moved by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Susie. Any further discussion?
Yes, okay. It says they're gonna be drinking and dancing and it's on public streets. Do they, insurance? I mean,
You're the guy people aren't gonna bring to the party, because you just kill the mood.
No, but I'm the guy who used to have to arrest them.
Good heavens. All right, where are we on liability on a
We
public
do,
street if there's
we do
drinking
this
and
on a
dancing?
number of times a year. We'll look into the exact with it, but this will all go through special events, and they'll have a list of things that they have to meet, which, unless he's seen it already, should include a liability waiver in there, correct? Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
then I'm okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't see
Sometimes
nothing
I've
here,
read
that's why I
one.
asked the question.
Raise the roof, drinking and dancing, all right?
Dancing.
Dancing.
All right, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Thanks, Dan. Okay. Item number 21K. The first reading of Resolution 2023-18 relating to the acceptance of a grant from the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority for improvements to Levitt Park and the Levitt Park Park House. Kirk, would you just walk us through this?
Sure. Excuse me. Be glad to, and I, Director Levisik is here as well, if you have any other, more specific question on what's going on. So, a grant opportunity came up through CDFA, in March for a, community center grants, for improvements. This was discussed with, Director Levisik, and she said Levitt Park has a plan in place. They're ready, they actually are, not quite shovel-ready, but they're really close and shovel-ready to being able to move a project forward. The application went in. I will say, and I've said this to you before, two things happened. One, I was really happy we got approved, but it moved a lot quicker than would have expected, which isn't a bad thing, but it certainly got us moving through a little bit faster than we wanted. I'd be glad to, if you guys wanted to have her explain exactly what they're gonna be doing, but there's playground restoration, there's AV equipment, AD accessibility, it's almost $500,000 worth of projects. There is a 15% match that we are required. The Levitt Park Community Volunteers, the Levitt Park Trust, and our Parks Department impact fees are gonna cover that 15%. So we will not be looking for any new monies to be coming, to expend for our portion of this, project.
Superb leadership on this, Counselor Felch. And just to make it clear, the Levitt Park Community Volunteers are contributing, or making a donation of $25,000. Levitt Park Trust, $25,000, and Park Department impact fees, $19,330. So that 15% is paid for in its entirety. This is not a new. Correct. That's outstanding. Okay. So Amy Lovisic has submitted this report and is recommending that a public hearing concerning the acceptance of this grant be scheduled for the meeting on August 14th, 2023. We have a series of 3 motions right now. First one is to move to waive a reading of Resolution 2023-18 relating to the acceptance of a grant from the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority for improvements to Levitt Park and the Levitt Park House, and read by title only. I might as well just read the whole darn thing. That thing's so long. Counselor Cheney makes the motion, seconded by Counselor Haynes. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion passes. Next, looking to move a first reading of Resolution 2023-18 relating to the acceptance of a grant from the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority for improvements to Levitt Park and the Levitt Park House. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion passes. And finally, looking to move to schedule a public hearing on August 14th, 2023, during the regular city council meeting to gather public input prior to any action being taken. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. That's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes.
Just a quick note on that. Our association has already made plans for the gazebo that will be added on, and this is part of that pays for it. I have a big picture of it that I'll bring to the next meeting when this is on the agenda.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. All right, moving along to agenda items 22 under unfinished business. Staff report, agenda 22A, agenda item 22A, discontinuance of Paper Street, Jefferson Street, something we've worked on for quite some time right now. The town of Guilford accepted Jefferson Street prior to the creation of Laconia. A section of Jefferson Street shown in the blue box on your attachment, although accepted by the town of Guilford, was never constructed. As we know, Paugus Properties LLC has requested that the city discontinue this section of Jefferson Street. Abutters are required to be notified 14 days before the public hearing for discontinuing a public road. The letters to the abutters were mailed on May 26th, 2023. The May 22nd, 2023 City Council meeting, a motion was approved to schedule a public hearing on this matter. That public hearing was held earlier this evening. And so right now, we'll be looking for a motion to move that the City Council discontinue the unconstructed section of Jefferson Street right-of-way that is between the eastern edge of the Dell Avenue right-of-way at its intersection with Jefferson Street to the railroad right-of-way that is east of Dell Avenue. So made by Counselor Felch, seconded by Counselor Cheney. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. It's 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Almost there. Item number 22B has been tabled. Item number 22C, which is the proposed application of the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority for CDBG funds for improvements at the Millview Apartments. This is something that we've read earlier this evening. I'm happy to reread it to make the motion more thorough.
No, not needed.
Okay,
Waive that, yep.
I guess we can do that. Right now, right now I'll be looking, the report in front of you, filed by Kirk Biotti, City Manager, is to support the proposed application to the New Hampshire Community Development Authority. So I'll be looking for a single motion to approve the submittal of the New Hampshire Community Development Finance Authority, CDBG, application for improvements at the Millview Apartments, and vote to authorize the city manager to sign and submit the CDBG application, and upon approval of the CDBG application, authorize the city manager to execute any documents which may be necessary to effectuate the CDBG contract and any amendments thereto. So made by Counselor Genie, seconded by Counselor Felch. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of this motion, please indicate by raising your hands. 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. Appreciate your patience. Item number 22D, adoption of the city's residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for proposed improvements at Millview Apartments. We've also covered this a little earlier this evening. Of the public hearing portion. So we'll now be looking for a motion to move to approve the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan for proposed improvements at Millview Apartments as presented, so made by Council Felch, seconded by Council Cheney. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate by raising your hands. With 6 votes in the affirmative, and that motion passes. That does conclude our formal agenda for this evening. Thanks for everyone who's attended. I do want to go into a relatively brief, non-public session with the council here. When we return to public session, it will only be to adjourn this meeting. So, thank you all for attending. And Katie, when you're ready, walk us through getting into non-public, and I'd ask Kirk to prepare what I sent over to you. Pass it around. Take your time.
A counselor to make a motion to go into non-public for the reason.
So
I'll make a
moved.
motion.
Counselor Haynes, seconded by Counselor Bogert.
And which one is it? 91A, which?
I sent you.
Absolutely.
There were more on
Really
there.
enjoyed that the other night.
Oh,
so,
good. Good, I'm glad you
Gosh,
came.
rats.
What?
It's only part of what I sent over. They didn't realize it.
Okay.
What am I looking at?
We gotta,
Roll call.
we're still on the air, so
Yeah, until, because,
Yep.
so we do the roll call, then I'll shut it off.
I'm
Okay.
just saying, so people don't talk about.
Counselor Cheney?
Yes.
Counselor Susie?
Yes.
Counselor Littman?
Yes.
Counselor Haynes?
Yes.
Counselor Bogert?
Yes.
Counselor Felch?
Yes.
6 votes in the affirmative. We're in, now in non-public session under RSA 91A3, Roman 2, consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real personal property, which, if discussed in the public, would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to those of the general community. That's the justification to go into non-public.